Picture this. It's Tuesday, January 24th, 1967. You're standing on your front lawn in Chicago, tossing a baseball with your kid. The sun is warm on your face. You're wearing a light jacket, maybe just a sweater. The temperature hits 65 degrees. 65. In late January, in Chicago. You're thinking about spring training. You're wondering if winter is already over. People are walking around in short sleeves, laughing about how mild it's been. Thunderstorms roll through that evening. Someone even spots a funnel cloud in the southwest suburbs. It feels like April, not January. 2 days later, you can't find your car. It's buried under 15 feet of snow, and you won't see it again for 3 weeks. This is the story of the worst blizzard in American history. The storm that brought the third largest city in the nation to its knees. The storm that killed more than 70 people across the Midwest. The storm that created the greatest disruption to Chicago since the Great Fire of 1871. And the storm that nobody saw coming. If you lived through it, these memories are still sharp. If you've never heard the full story, prepare yourself. Because what happened on January 26th and 27th, 1967, will make you grateful for every weather forecast you've ever received. The morning of Thursday, January 26th, started like any other winter day. Snow was in the forecast, sure. The weatherman said maybe 1 to 2 inches by morning. Nothing unusual, nothing to worry about. People got up, got dressed, had their coffee, and headed to work. Kids caught the school bus. Secretaries typed memos. Factory workers clocked in. The city moved like it always did. The first flakes started falling at 5:02 in the morning. Light stuff. Typical January snow. By the time most people were at their desks or their workstations, there were a few inches on the ground. Still nothing alarming. Chicago knew how to handle snow. But this snow didn't stop. By mid-morning, it was coming down at 2 inches per hour. 2 inches. Every 60 minutes. The sky turned white. Visibility dropped to nothing. And the wind started howling off Lake Michigan, gusting to 53 miles per hour, whipping that snow into drifts that grew taller by the minute. At noon, 8 inches had already accumulated. O'Hare Airport, the busiest airport in the world, shut down for the first time in its history. Schools started releasing students early. Businesses told workers to head home. And that's when the real nightmare began, because everyone tried to leave at once. The expressways filled with cars, the streets filled with cars, and then everything stopped moving. People sat in traffic, engines running, watching the snow pile up around them. An hour passed, then 2. The car in front of you wasn't moving. The car behind you wasn't moving. And the snow kept falling. Some people made a decision. They got out. They started walking. They left their cars right there on the Kennedy Expressway, right there on Lakeshore Drive, right there in the middle of Michigan Avenue. And they walked. They walked through knee-deep snow with the wind cutting through their coats like knives. They walked for miles. A trip that normally took 30 minutes stretched into 5 hours, 6 hours, or did not happen at all. The evening news came on that Thursday night. The newscaster looked into the camera and said the worst of the storm was over. He was wrong. The snow did not stop until 10:10 the next morning. When Friday dawned, Chicago looked like another planet. 23 inches of snow had fallen. The most snow from a single storm in the city's recorded history. But it wasn't just the amount. It was the drifts. 15 feet high in some places, taller than houses. Cars had vanished completely, buried under mountains of white. You could walk down Lakeshore Drive, one of the busiest roads in America, and see nothing but strange bumps in the snow. Each bump was a car. 50,000 vehicles sat abandoned on Chicago streets. Some estimates say it was even higher. More than 1,000 city buses were stranded, many with passengers still inside who had spent the entire night trying to stay warm in unheated vehicles. Hotels filled to capacity within hours, every room taken. Stranded travelers sleeping in lobbies, in hallways, wherever they could find space. And still more people kept trying to find shelter. 50,000 sat abandoned. Think about what that means. No cell phones, no way to call your family except finding a payphone if you could get to one, and hoping the lines weren't jammed. Overloaded telephone systems meant you might pick up the receiver and hear nothing. Silence. Your family had no idea where you were. Your spouse didn't know if you were alive or frozen in a drift somewhere. Your children waited by the window, watching the snow pile higher, wondering when daddy or mommy would come home. Some didn't come home for 2 days. The airport stayed closed until Monday night. The expressways were impassable. The trains could barely run. Chicago, the city that prided itself on being the city that works, had completely stopped working. Nothing ran on schedule. Nothing ran at all. And in the middle of this chaos, babies decided they weren't going to wait. Pregnant women went into labor all across the city. Ambulances couldn't respond. The streets were blocked. The snow was too deep, so people improvised. Expectant mothers were loaded onto bulldozers. Snowplows became ambulances. Neighbors pulled women on sleds through the drifts to reach hospitals. At least a dozen babies were born at home because there was simply no way to get anywhere. Babies were born in cars, in homes, in hallways. One family's story captures it all. A young mother, pregnant and stranded overnight in a car with her husband, her sister, and her toddler son. By morning, the car had run out of gas. The toddler was turning blue from the cold. Walking wasn't an option. So they made their way to the L train, hoping to get home to Rogers Park. This story captures the fear and improvisation of the night. They didn't make it. The mother's water broke on the train. Passengers started laying newspaper on the floor. She refused to give birth on a CTA car. The train got stuck at Howard Street Station for 2 hours. Finally, somehow, they got her off and to an Evanston hospital just in time. They refused to let the city take that life away. The baby survived. The mother survived. But the terror of those hours, stranded in a frozen city with no way out, never left them. Survived is something they would not take for granted. Emergency services did what they could. Helicopters became the only reliable way to move through the city. They delivered insulin to diabetics. They brought food and blankets to motorists still trapped in their cars. They flew medical supplies to hospitals that were running low. Pilots navigated through dangerous conditions, risking their own lives to save others. Helicopters were a lifeline. Fire department helicopters flew continuously, handling medical emergencies and rescue operations that ground vehicles couldn't reach. 300 people sheltered overnight in a single firehouse because they had nowhere else to go. The fire department opened its doors and did what it could. Mayor Richard J. Daley went on television and radio. He ordered city workers to clear streets around the clock. He asked citizens to help any way they could. Dig out your sidewalk, check on your neighbors, share what you have. Help your neighbor if you can. But for some, the storm brought out something darker. Looting broke out across parts of the city. Stores on Roosevelt Road were hit hard. Windows smashed, merchandise stolen. When police confronted one group of looters at a shoe store, gunfire erupted. And a 10-year-old girl, an innocent child caught in the crossfire, was killed. Shot dead during a snowstorm because someone wanted to steal shoes. A minister was run over by a snowplow. Others died of heart attacks from the brutal work of shoveling snow that seemed to have no end. 26 people died in Chicago alone. Across the Midwest, the death toll reached 76. Yet even in darkness, there were moments of extraordinary light. Neighbors who had barely spoken before knocked on each other's doors. "Do you have milk? Do you need bread? Is your furnace working?" Strangers helped push cars. Strangers gave strangers rides home without a second thought. Back then, you could trust someone to take you where you needed to go. One neighborhood in Burnham dug a tunnel through the snow from one house to another so families could share food. Another family's neighbor delivered homemade bread door to door by sled. A local store got a milk delivery truck stranded at their location and started calling families with babies and young children to come get what they needed. When a neighbor went into labor and couldn't get an ambulance, people loaded her into a front-end loader and transported her to a main road where an ambulance was waiting. They made it work because they had to, because that's what you did. Kids, of course, thought the whole thing was magical. Schools closed. The snow kept falling. And for children, this was the best thing that had ever happened. Snow forts went up in every backyard. Sleds made from tea trays and baking sheets flew down every hill. Snowball fights lasted all day. Kids came home soaked and frozen and grinning from ear to ear. One teenager later remembered standing on a huge snow mound when a plow came down the street. He didn't back up fast enough and nearly got taken out. But he laughed about it. That was the adventure of being young in a world turned white. For adults, it was misery. But for kids, the blizzard of 1967 was the stuff of legend. Digging out took forever. The city sent 2,500 workers with 500 pieces of equipment to clear the streets. Snowplows from Iowa, Wisconsin, and Michigan rolled into Chicago to help. National Guard units were deployed. But the abandoned cars made everything harder. You could not plow a street that was filled with buried vehicles. Workers had to dig out each car, one by one, move it, then plow, then move to the next block, and start again. Snow was hauled by dump truck to the Chicago River and dumped in, because there was nowhere else to put it. Rail cars were filled with snow and shipped south. Some even made it to Florida, where children who had never seen snow in their lives got to touch it for the first time. It took 3 weeks to clear all the streets. 3 weeks. The snow did not fully melt until March, and it wasn't over after that first storm. 4 days later, on February 1st, 4 more inches fell. Then on February 5th, another 8.5 inches. In an 11-day stretch, 36.5 inches of snow buried the city. That's close to a normal entire season's worth, all in less than 2 weeks. The economic damage was staggering. $150 million in losses. Adjusted for today, that's nearly $1.5 billion. Businesses were shut for days, and commerce ground to a halt. The National Weather Service later said it was the biggest disruption to Chicago since the Great Fire of 1871. The city learned hard lessons. In the years that followed, Chicago developed better snow removal plans. Overnight parking bans were implemented on main streets during winter months. Sensors and cameras were installed to monitor conditions in real time. The fleet of snowplows was organized into phases based on snowfall amounts. The disaster of 1967 became the blueprint for how to never let it happen again. But the technology gap is what really separated 1967 from today. There were no satellite images. There was no Doppler radar. There were no computer models predicting storm paths days in advance. Weather forecasting was educated guesswork. When that storm formed, no one knew what it would become until it was already too late. Today, a storm like that would trigger warnings days ahead. Schools would close before the first flake fell. Businesses would send workers home early. People would stock up on bread and milk and hunker down. The casualties would be far fewer because we would see it coming. In 1967, they did not see it coming, and they paid the price. Ask anyone who lived through it. They remember exactly where they were when the snow started. They remember the walk home, if they made it home. They remember the silence that fell over the city when all the cars stopped moving. They remember the cold, the fear, the uncertainty. But they also remember the neighbors who showed up with shovels, the strangers who offered rides, the way people took care of each other when the world turned white and hostile. There is something about a disaster that strips away the everyday barriers between people. When everyone is suffering, pride becomes a luxury. When everyone needs help, helping becomes automatic. The blizzard of 1967 was awful. People died. People suffered. But it was also a reminder of what community means when everything else falls apart. The kids who built snow forts in 1967 are grandparents now. They tell their grandchildren about the storm that shut down Chicago, about walking to school through tunnels of snow taller than their fathers, about the silence of a city without traffic, without buses, without the usual roar of life. And their grandchildren listen, the way all children listen to stories of the old days, not quite believing it could have been that different. But it was that different. It was that hard. And the people who lived through it were that resilient. The blizzard of 1967 is not just a weather event. It is a shared memory for everyone who experienced it. A before and after moment in millions of lives. The storm that taught Chicago it was not invincible. The storm that proved the weather does not care about your plans. And the storm that showed, once again, that when nature brings its worst, Americans bring their best. Neighbors helping neighbors. Strangers becoming friends. A city buried under snow but not broken. If you remember the blizzard of 1967, you know exactly what I mean. The cold that seeped into your bones. The relief when you finally made it home. The way the whole city seemed to exhale when the plows finally cleared your street. It was not perfect. It was terrifying and exhausting and sometimes tragic. But it was also a moment when people showed who they really were. And mostly, they were good. Were you there? Do you remember the snow, the cold, the way your neighborhood pulled together? Drop a comment below and share your story. These memories matter. They are part of American history now. Hit subscribe to keep these stories alive. Share this with someone who remembers. Until next time, stay warm. And maybe check the weather forecast one more time.